Hey guys, what you're going to want to do is get out your chapter 39 notes. We're going to do the fill in the blank notes, and I'm going to cover half of chapter 39 today. It's over animal behavior. Really, the main point of this entire chapter is just for you to see a bunch of different examples of innate and learned behaviors that have been shaped by natural selection and therefore increase survival and reproductive fitness. And then today, after you're done with this half lecture, you're going to do a little activity, an HHMI, biointeractive activity on elephants and communication. And you're going to see a really good example of how communication has been shaped through the process of evolution in elephants to increase their fitness and their ability to survive. So I'm really just going to go through a bunch of vocabulary words and some examples for each one. Behavioral biologists are going to study behavior to see basically how evolution has shaped them to act in a certain way, how the environment has shaped animals or organisms. We're talking mostly about animals right now, so I'll just keep it about animals, how they have been shaped by the environment to act a certain way. So ethology is the study of animal behavior, and a behavior is what an animal does and how it does it. And so there's a lot of things that go into why an animal behaves the way it does or how it behaves the way it does. Genetics, environment, the need for survival and reproduction, and like I said before, natural selection is going to shape this over time. So I'm going to go over a couple of words. Proximate cause of behavior and ultimate cause of behavior. Proximate cause of behavior is almost, you can think of it as what you see immediately, how the behavior occurs, and then the ultimate cause of behavior is the why it occurs in the context of natural selection. So proximate cause is how it occurs, what you're seeing on the surface, and the ultimate cause is kind of what underneath is the evolutionary or survival reason for it to happen. I'm going to give you an example here. So a male stickleback fish is going to attack another male stickleback fish that invades its nesting territory. So how is it going to know that this is another male? When male stickleback fish are in mating season, they are going to develop these this red coloring under their belly. So the proximate cause of behavior is, so the how or the immediate why is going to be one male sees another male, sees the red underneath his belly, and is going to attack him. That's the proximate cause of behavior. The ultimate cause of behavior is what is the underlying reason, the evolutionary survival reason that this happens is if this male chases away this other male, he is then going to be able to mate with the females and he is going to be able to pass along its genetics. So there's proximate causes, the how, and then there's ultimate causes. All right. We also have innate behaviors. These are developmentally fixed and they're not learned. So you can think of innate behaviors as having a genetic component to them. A person or another animal is born with an innate behavior. An example of an innate behavior are these things called fixed action patterns, or FAPs. Fixed action patterns. It's a sequence of unlearned acts that are unchangeable and usually carried to completion. All right. They are triggered by some kind of stimulus, and the reason for these fixed action pattern behaviors is that it's going to ensure activities that are essential to survival are performed correctly without practice. And I know you guys can read, so I'm going to try not to read too much off the slides, but sometimes that helps to hear it and see it. So here is your example of a fixed action pattern. So you see a picture of a goose, mama goose. Here is her egg. She is going to scoot the egg along until she gets to a place where the egg can be safe. And so she moves her head, and I wish we were in the class because I always do this in front of the class whenever I'm talking about this chapter. I actually show she is going to move the egg with her nose, kind of like this, kind of like back and forth. Move the egg and roll it, roll it, roll it. Well, scientists have done or ethologists have done studies where they've come in and they've grabbed the egg. She will continue to act as if she's moving the egg until she gets to the place where she originally wanted it to go. So this would be an example of innate behavior. It's something that an animal is going to do to completion no matter what. And it's just going to ensure survival activities. Another example of a fixed action pattern is when you see your dog and your dog is looking for somewhere to sit, and your dog's going to sniff around, and then they're going to spin around in a circle, around and around and around, and then they're going to sit down. Apparently this was a way to whenever ancestors of dogs were in the forest or grassland or wherever they were, this was a way for them to push down the grass and to make sure they don't get, I guess, they're not sitting in a big clump of grass, or maybe to check to see if where they're about to sit is going to be safe. It's also believed that fixed action pattern yawning might be a fixed action pattern in humans, although there may actually be a physiological reason, a good physiological reason for why we yawn. Okay, so this is how the fixed action pattern, the innate behavior of stickleback males being aggressive towards other stickleback males with red bellies. Scientists wanted to know what is it that's the stimulus or the trigger for them to become aggressive. And so what they did was they had an actual stickleback fish right here. And then they had different shapes with the red belly. And what they found is it didn't matter what the shape was, every single one of these caused the stickleback to become aggressive. So then they realized the sign stimulus for the stickleback aggression was the red underneath the belly. All right. Some other behavior words is kinesis and taxis. And you guys remember this from the first week of school when we did the pill bug lab. Kinesis is going to be random movement in response to a stimulus. And so my example for kinesis is if there is a congregation of roaches in a room and I flip the light on, the roaches are going to scatter in all different directions. They're not really going in any one direction, just hoping that they hit a spot where they're going to be safe. Taxis is going to be an automatic movement toward or away something. So phototaxis, movement in response to light. Chemotaxis, movement in response to chemicals. And geotaxis would be movement in response to gravity. So these are just two examples of movement behaviors. All right, another example of an innate and also, this is a really good example of something that's innate, that birds are born with a innate desire to do, but it also is a learned behavior, and I'll talk about that in a minute when we talk about cranes. So migration is an innate behavior that there's also a learning component to it, where birds are going to change their location based on environmental cues like sun stars, magnetic field, and landmarks. And the reason why they're going to do this, I'm sure you learned it a long time ago, is that it's going to probably get cold, so they're going to migrate to a place where it's going to be warm. So evolution and natural selection has selected for birds that have an innate urge to migrate together in groups when the season changes or when other things change. All right. We also have an internal biological clock. So this is something that's innate. Our circadian rhythm is going to signal us to obviously get tired at a certain time, but we also have a circadian rhythm, or mice here have or hamsters, sorry, these are hamsters, have a circadian rhythm that's going to help them determine when their coat color needs to change by season. So you have a 24-hour circadian rhythm, but dark and light. Remember, we talked about the pineal gland and melatonin being released when it's dark. Part of our circadian rhythm lets us know it's time to sleep and rest. There's also a circadian rhythm that's determined by seasons that's going to help the mice change fur color. And I would ask you, why is that? Well, because in changing seasons, the terrain is going to change color. The hamsters or the mice, I know I keep saying mice, it just looks like a mouse to me. The hamsters or the mice are going to need to blend in, because mice are going to do this too, are going to blend in with their environment so that they can survive. So natural selection has selected for mice that have circadian clocks that allow them to change their coat color without consciously making that decision. All right, and then plants are going to have internal clocks too that are going to help them do things like that. All right, so we'll talk a little bit about signals and stimulus that causes a change in behavior and is the basis of animal communication. You're going to, like I said, do the little activity later where you look at, you're actually going to hear all the different animal or all the different elephant calls. Other signals besides auditory, so you have auditory signals that are going to help animals communicate with each other. We have pheromones. Had we been at school doing the beekeeping thing, I would teach you all about pheromones and how queen bees are going to release pheromones, which are chemical signals from one individual to another to tell worker bees go get honey or go get nectar to make honey. We need more pollen. We need to do this. We need to kill all the males in the hive. She will send out a signal at some point. We no longer need the males. And usually around November, December, January, a beehive is all female, which is pretty interesting. Visual signals are going to help animals communicate. Tactile signals, a male fruit fly literally goes and taps the female on the kind of on the back right there whenever he wants to mate, which I think is kind of funny. That's just part of his courtship behavior. But there's just all different ways to communicate. Honeybees are really interesting in the way that they communicate food to the other bees. So if a bee is out foraging and it finds nectar and pollen, it is going to come back to the hive and it's going to tell all the other bees exactly where the pollen and nectar is by doing something called either a round dance or a waggle dance. A round dance, they're just going to go around in circles. That means there is food that is less than 100 meters away, and so all the other bees will sniff this bee and will follow the scent to wherever it is, so it's close by. The waggle dance is going to be for food that is greater than 100 meters away. So the bee is going to come in, it's going to do a figure 8 dance. As it comes up the middle, it's going to do a like a waggle. It's going to shake itself back and forth. The waggle, so the figure 8 tells the other bees the food is really far away. The waggle, the frequency of the shaking is going to tell them exactly how far away the food is, and the angle that the bee is faced. So if this is north, south, east, and west, the angle that the bee is dancing is going to tell the other bees where the food is located. So super interesting. So in conjunction to innate behaviors are going to be learned behaviors. They really do go hand in hand. Animals are born already knowing how to do some things, but then they're also born looking to the older animals for how they need to perform a certain task. So I'll talk a little bit about some of those in the upcoming slides. So learned behavior is anything that's going to be modified based on the environment or based on experiences. All right, so we're going to go through some types of learning. So we had innate and learned behavior. These are different types of learned behavior that I'm going to go through here. Habituation is going to be a loss of responsiveness to a stimuli that convey little or no information. It's a very simple form of learning. So let's say somebody is scared of snakes, and it's just desensitization basically is all it is. If a person's scared of snakes, and then they go and they work on a snake farm for a summer and they find, oh, I didn't get hurt. That's going to be habituation. It's going to be loss of responsiveness, desensitization to something. So that's a simple form of learning. Imprinting is a type of learned behavior where a little goose, a baby goose or baby geese, they're going to look up, and the first thing that they see moving away from them, they are going to start following, and that's going to be their mother. So this is limited to a sensitive period in life, and it's usually irreversible. So when you hear the stories about the geese or the ducks that are imprinting on the human that they see right when they hatch, that's that learned behavior. There's a little sensitive period where they're going to imprint on that human, and they're going to follow the human. They're supposed to be following their mom, obviously, but this guy Lorenz, he did a study on this and found that they will follow whatever they see. And that's just supposed to increase survival, because if they follow the big thing they see right when they hatch, most likely that big thing is going to be their mom, and the mom's going to protect them, and they'll have a better chance at survival. So another example of proximate and ultimate cause. So proximate cause of behavior is geese will follow the first thing, big thing. So why is that behavior happening? Why are they following this big goose right here? Because when they're born, they follow the first thing, big thing, walking away from them. So that's a proximate cause of their behavior. The ultimate cause is if they imprint on her, they're going to receive more care and necessary skills, and they'll have a greater chance of survival. So hopefully you guys can see there's this example of proximate and ultimate cause. All right. And then imprinting is also something that is done when birds like cranes are learning migration patterns or how to migrate. And this has been studied with captive breeding programs of endangered species. So you see right here, this plane right here is trying to teach these birds, trying to have them imprint on it to teach them about migration. All right, and then the last one I want to go over real quick is spatial learning. So animals can learn, they can learn where things are. They can form this cognitive map of where things are. And birds can do this by forming like spatial maps in their minds of where the nut caches are, so where they've kept their food or stored their food. And how do we know this? Because humans will go in and they'll move their food and they'll see the bird will actually go back and forth to where they actually left the food. So we know that all animals are going to have these cognitive maps. Um, Here is an example of an actual wasp that's going to leave its nest. So it's going to form a nest in the middle of pine cones. All right, so you'll see the nest here, and then you see a ring of pine cones around it. The human comes, and the human that's studying these wasps and their behavior is going to move the pine cones, but not the nest. And so the wasp, mom wasp or whatever, is going to come back, or the wasp that came from the nest is going to come back to the pine cones and not the nest itself. So what this tells us is that animals can learn and can form cognitive maps based on landmarks or environmental cues. And we do that, and this is just kind of like, yeah, duh, we all do this. Humans do it, but it's kind of cool to know, okay, wasps are actually going to look around and say, okay, that's a ring of pine cones around the nests. And then, that's what they're going to look for, like that landmark is what they're going to look for. So that's kind of interesting to know even insects are going to do that kind of stuff. So I'm going to end it there, and I'll talk about associative learning next time. You guys have an HHMI activity that you're going to do with elephants, and what I need you to do is answer those questions. Please do it on your own and not get the answers from your classmates. You guys can work together, but I really need you guys to put the stuff in your own words. It's actually kind of interesting. You get to play all the elephant sounds and you get to see an experiment that was done to determine how exactly do elephants communicate. It's pretty interesting. So this shouldn't pose any technical difficulties for you guys. This website's actually pretty easy to use. All right, so just make sure you get those questions done and email them to me, and have a great day.